So, just a quick introduction. My name is Craig Nickel. I'm a crop production and horticulture agent for the Midway Extension District. And that serves Ellsworth and Russell County, so we're a two-county district. This year would be a good time, especially as we're getting warm and everybody wants to get out and get gardening. A little bit too early on our warmth, in my opinion. I'd like it to be more normal, but so that could cause some issues down the road if we get a late freeze, but just wanted to provide some information on gardening with native plants. One of my favorite topics, you just look around and see what is native to this area. There's just so many options to incorporate plants that are fit for this area that are adapted to our climate into your home landscape that are less maintenance and that. So just trying to get the word out about gardening with native plants. And at any time during the presentation you have a question, feel free to ask me. It's kind of gonna be a broad overview because in the time frame, because I know Sarah Wolf might have to get back to work, so try to get wrapped up by 12:50. So, and I want to definitely thank a coworker from Douglas County, Sharon Ashworth, helped. She's done this presentation and he sent it to me, and I kind of modified it to fit our region because Douglas County is definitely a little bit different than here. Some outlines. We're just going to kind of go over the definition of native, non-native, and native. Emphasis on integrating native plants and planting consideration and maintenance, and then of course the big one would be plant recommendations for this area and some good resources. Now, what does make a plant native? So the technical definitions is any plant that would be evolved, not and adapted to a specific ecoregion that's not genetically altered or where man has done any interference. So that's kind of the definition of a native plant. Now, like I mentioned, the key benefits to native plants is that they're low maintenance, but not no maintenance. I mean, you do see a lot of our natives growing out into the wild, and sometimes just depending on the year and moisture, you might see certain ones more so than the others. But they're adapted to our local conditions of moisture, heat, cold, wind, soil. I know we're considered in the post-rock region of Kansas, which means we have high calcium carbonate soils, which typically means our pHs are a little bit higher. So some of our native plants that are adapted for this area can handle those higher soil pHs, where some of our non-natives and introduced species might not be able to handle those. Heat and drought tolerant. Everybody knows our weather's always nice and hot, and last several years have been pretty dry. So that can help save you on watering costs if you're using city water or even just your own water well. If we do hit a really bad drought year and the city has to implement more restrictive water usage policies, that could having native plants in your home landscape can be a benefit that can survive those longer periods without water if those are enacted. And then typically another good one is no fertilizer or pesticides, so you don't have to worry about fertilizing or spraying for insects. So that's another benefit that can save you for implementing natives into your landscape. And like I mentioned, you really start looking around, and that's kind of how I got really interested in growing up, is just the beauty of them and the variety that's out there once you start really looking. Now, when you're looking at plants and determining if they're native, there's a couple really good websites that you can spend a lot of time, and I know I have. And this one is kswildfire.org. It's a good one. And then this USDA plant database, that's where I got this map from the Blue Wild Indigo Baptisia australis. And that will give you a map of kind of where those native plants, the range is. So we're kind of on the western edge of Blue Wild Indigo, but that's the USDA plant database. So that's another good place to go to when you're looking up plants or unsure. Then, when you're looking at plants, especially if you're going to like a garden store or location that sells started plants, just being aware of what's a native and that's just a native plant that has been altered by man. Typically, it's been cloned or through selective breeding to highlight certain traits. Now, these do have some benefits. There again, you might find them more commonly, like at your Stutzman's or other home garden centers, since they can sell them a little bit better. But they're not going to be a true native. But they're still, kind of in that general realm of a native. And then there also has been some studies on these nativars that they're not quite as beneficial to your pollinator insects like your bees, butterflies. It's kind of interesting that they know the difference between a true native and something that's been altered. So these nativars might not provide the benefit to your pollinator insects like a true native will. A native is going to have the genus and species. So in this case, that's a coneflower. So a true native would be Echinacea purpurea. So that would indicate it's a true native. And I do have some examples from some tags that show, the genus species of a true native plant, if you want to look at that. So that's just something to be aware of if you're at a garden center or somewhere buying a plant, how to actually know if it is a native plant. And that's some examples of how the nativars can look a little different and through some modifications. There again, they can look nice, but like I said, there's not a true native plant.
I have a question.
Yeah.
I have a garden, what used to be a garden plot, and I'm trying to grow wildflowers in it. So I spread, just broadcast wildflowers. Now the coneflowers have taken that over.
Yeah, coneflowers can.
What do I do about that kind? I just
Yeah,
dig them up,
Yeah.
individually spray them,
yeah, you want to dig them up and kind of clear them out.
because they have taken it.
Yep, coneflowers are kind of notorious for
Okay,
that.
okay, we'll do that again.
But
We'll take your extras. Okay.
Bring you trouble.
But some of the benefits of nativars, that they can have, some nice pretty colors, different heights, styles of blooms, disease resistance. But there again, the genetic diversity, nectar, seeds, nutrition, for your beneficial insects can be a concern. And like I mentioned before, a really big benefit and reason to incorporate native plants is for our native pollinators. A big focus is always on honeybees, but there is all sorts of different types of bees that are present, and even wasps, butterflies, and other insects that are considered pollinators that we might not think about. So That'd be like a green sweat bee is another pollinator, and just a whole host of other insects that are considered pollinators.
For Alice had a
Oh.
question.
I'm just being ignored, it's okay. Listen, bees, is it better to let your lawn grow up in dandelions, for instance, for the bees? Or? what-
Yeah, that's
Just
a-
because there are a lot of bees.
Dandelions in your early season and even henbit, it is actually recommended to, kind of leave some around, because that typically that's one of your first food sources for bees, honeybees and others that typically blooms first. So yes, there is recommendations on not totally getting rid of them, but it's always hard for people, especially now they see them blooming in their yard and want to spray, but it is one of the first flowering species that bees rely on.
So you can spray after the dandelions have finished blooming and the henbit have finished blooming?
Well, you're kind of past the point of spraying at that point anyways, so.
Upper left corner there, they look more like wasps. Are they a true bee of some kind, or are they a wasp? On the left, clear on the left side there, that's third and fourth row down, right there,
That, I mean, I think this chart's just showing bees, but there is wasp.
yeah. Wasps pollinate a lot,
Yeah, like not as much as your bees, but they still do.
we've got plenty of wasps.
Yeah. And this is just showing a coneflower bee on echinacea, and then a blue sage bee on a salvia plant. So, and each species of pollinator kind of prefers their own different species of natives too, if you really start looking into that. And then also good reason for natives is your caterpillar hosts for your butterflies, such as this great spangled fritillary. It likes your violet species of native plants. And then like a zebra swallowtail, the caterpillar hosts like your Asimia, your pawpaws, which we don't see those as much, but also that could be like a lilac, a red bud. We'll see more of those in your milkweeds. So knowing what you're planting, and if you're wanting to target certain species of butterflies or pollinators, that'll be something you'll want to look into. Now, as far as integrating into your landscape, you can go either just a small area, or if you have a big area, it depends on the size. It doesn't have to be your whole area, but it could just be a small little area. Start small. Cause it can be a trial by error sometimes on what might take and whatnot, so. Stepping into it, lightly can always be a good idea, because buying the plants can get costly too. And there again, just showing some different species and the different flowers and how they look. Is there again, I just like how the variety of natives are. And the big reason I put this together is if you've ever been walking on the walking path at Crescent Park, when I first moved here and got started in my position, this area was kind of overgrown, not being maintained. So it's been about 4 years now that I started the project. I came in, cleaned it up. I did leave some of the sedums in there just to have something, and kept it sprayed and sprayed back for weed control for a couple of years. And then last year, myself and Artis Hoffman there, we went and got a bunch of plants, and this is also in collaboration with the support of the city. So gotta recognize them and allowing me to do this and helping support. We got all the plants, planted them, and I was very pleased with the first year of development and growth on it. And that was kind of at the end of the growing season, how well everything took off. So if you're ever walking, things are just starting to regrow now, so it's gonna take a little bit, but definitely take a look at that, and you can always reach out to me and I'll be glad to even meet you there. If you want me to go over anything specific on it. Then when you're also thinking of native plants, don't forget about your grasses, especially with pollinators. Because your grass species, especially like little blue stem, can also support pollinators, especially caterpillars. Now, planting considerations. You want to follow the what I call 2 R's: right plant and right place. You definitely want to take a look at where you're going to be planting it. Is it full sun, part shade, or full shade? That's a very big considerations. Most of our native plants, especially for this area, are more that full sun requirement, which means over six hours of sunlight in a day. Some of the more shade tolerant natives are more fit for eastern Kansas and more wetter climates. So if you do have a shady spot, just know you're probably going to be planting more natives that are more suited for, like, say, far eastern Kansas or even Missouri type. And then also a good start is taking a soil sample. That just kind of gives you an idea of what your pH is and current nutrients. It's always a good idea to know what your soil test results are. Then also, I would always recommend to have an area dedicated for natives. I wouldn't try to place them in the mix of non-natives or other cared for plants. So this is just a picture of showing a big flop on that was not planted with very much consideration of what the space was required for the plants that they planted, and was probably too shaded for what was growing. And then a good tip, and I didn't do this last year on the Kreisig Park area, is about for late summer, early fall native perennials. You might consider cutting them back about 1/3 of that plant to reduce their height. I'll probably be doing that on the asters and some of those at Kreisig Park this year, because the asters did get pretty big last year, but they look nice. And even the little blue stem that I had kind of got a little bit tall on me, so been kind of laid over. And you were talking about aggressiveness. Yeah, make sure to look up like coneflowers, common milkweed, and some of those others, how aggressive they can on spreading and taking over, and plan accordingly when you're making a plan to incorporate native plants. Because if you've ever seen common milkweed, along the road or in pastures, it can get a pretty big patch going. So knowing that is always a good thing to know on management. So you might have to come in and reduce the stand of a certain species, or cut it back more aggressive in the years.
As you know, I got about 7 acres of mixed grass
Yeah.
out there. Are you saying that I should cut that back mid-season or something? For the height or not, or?
Well, in that situation where you're not watering, I wouldn't worry about it in that situation. This is more, say, a home landscape where you're watering and it might be getting more water than, say, a rain fed. Like where in front of your house where it's more of a,
Yeah,
yeah, kind of like a pasture or CRP type. Cause that's gonna be regulated by how much
yeah,
rainfall comes. Then some other considerations on native plants is look into a good variety, and that's, like I said, that's for your pollinators. Variety of your, different forms, color, bloom time, typically, ideally, you'd have a early bloom plants in the mix, mid bloom and then late bloom. That just kind of also helps, with your aesthetics. So you always have something blooming and nice to look at all the time throughout the year. The purpose, like I said, there again, that's primarily for your pollinators, bees, butterflies, moths, caterpillars, beetles. But then also consider for birds, especially when you're looking at some of your shrub type of species that eat the berries during the winter and whatnot. And then insects. Again, typically we're planting native plants for the insects, especially pollinators, so definitely avoid spraying insecticides, just let them eat them. Because if you spray an insecticide, you're gonna end up killing your beneficials and that defeats the purpose. And maintenance, this is one thing I did do at the native plant garden is deadhead the split blooms, especially on the yarrow plants that were there. I was just constantly going once they were done blooming, and I cut them off and then actually just threw them away. So and there again, you can do that with coneflower too to kind of help a little bit with the reseeding issue. But there are some that are more like an annual plant, like your foxgloves and cardinal flower, for example, that you kind of want to reseed so they come back the next year. And then for fall cleanup, just leave it. Don't worry about cleaning it up until about this time, or leave all that dead material. It's a good place for your pollinator insects to overwinter, and then also provide seeds for birds and other animals that for the overwinter. I just cleaned up the Creswick Park area a couple weeks ago. Once I started seeing everything come back and kind of felt we were safer for the insects to be out of a risk of dying from cold. Now, when you're considering planting native plants, there again, I'm not the best landscape designer or planner of what, but you kind of want to focus on your edges, where your focal points, where you're looking, especially if you're thinking at your home landscape, and that, even people walking by, if it's by a sidewalk, where your focal point's always going to go towards the edges. You can kind of see here they have more of a grass center, and then some others kind of on that very edge in the little raised area. Looks like not quite sure what that is, maybe a prairie coneflower and some phyllox there. So just consider that when you're looking at doing a home landscape with native plants. The Creswick Park, since it was I didn't really have too much of a plan. I was just kind of trying to recreate more of a natural look, that would resemble more of like a prairie situation. I kind of need a little bit more grass in there to do that, but so I just did a random mix. That's kind of how I did that one. Still, I think turned out pretty good. You can kind of see things from the street and that walking past, so. Now for plant recommendations, there again, Jess, can you help me? This is where you can easily lose yourself for hours at a time, because there's so many different types. We'll kind of start off with the ground covers, and like I mentioned, these will kind of be more of a east of here suited, but you can, if you're in a home landscape scenario where you can water more, you can still grow them well here. And these would be a part shade, less than 6 hours of sunlight list here. You got your sedges, Pennsylvania sedge, oak sedge, bristle leaf sedge. Got a Cedium ternatum, wild strawberry, sand phyllox, and wild petunia. And if it has a little larva, that means it's a host for a larva host plant. And that's just kind of some example. That would be a sedge, your wild strawberry, phyllox there. And I can't remember what that one is. Yeah, I can't remember what that one was. But those would be kind of some examples of those that would handle a little bit less sunlight, so less than 6 hours of sunlight. Full sun, you got your pussy toes there, rose verbena, wild petunia, purple poppy mall. You can see that growing wild around here. Sand phyllox again, Missouri evening primrose, calumet, and then we got a couple of grasses here. Also to highlight, when you're thinking about native plants, that's consider your lawn. I'd also recommend planting a buffalo grass lawn or blue grandma. Those are native grasses and can help with handle our heat and dry conditions. And this one would be your Missouri evening primrose. And that's just your buffalo grass. Again, the phyllox again. Great. Now, the vast majority are gonna probably fall in these natives for this area for up to 4 feet tall. You got your purple coneflower, yarrow. There's some different colors of these. It's white, yellow, and even orange. Prairie coneflower, liatris, blazing stars. That's a cool looking one. Plains coroperis, another favorite of mine. Blue false indigo. I was really hoping to get purple prairie clover at Chrysler Park. I got white prairie clover. Wasn't able to get purple. Purple, if you ever see this grow out in the wild, it's very, very beautiful. One of my favorites.
How tall is that yet?
Oh, the white prairie clover got about this tall. So yeah, these are gonna be all, like I said,
They're pretty bushy,
not necessarily bushy, kind of spindly.
spindly stalk.
Yeah. Another favorite of mine is butterfly milkweed, kinda has that orangish yellowish look to it. I also like the goldenrods. I also have that at the Crescent Park.
I've got plenty of that if anybody wants.
And then Heliopsis, that's actually considered sometimes called a false sunflower. And then Simmons digitalis is another one. Not as familiar with that one. I think we're on the western edge of that one. Prairie Phyllox is another one, and that's also one that will flower a little bit earlier. And I have blazing started on there twice. Wild bergamot, New England your asters, and then ironweed. So, and Jessica handed out a handout. I just like that one. That lists a whole gamut of native plants that are kind of fit for at least a good chunk of Kansas. Some of them will be kind of more for eastern Kansas, but there again, just knowing what you're planting and where you're going to be planting it is a good idea, because if it is more suited for eastern Kansas or Missouri, it might require more water compared to native plants that are suited for central and western Kansas.
Have you ever been to this plant sale?
Yeah, I'll get there, because that's where I got the plants from, for Crescent Park. And I would recommend, if you ever just even visiting it, if you wanna see a whole different mix of native plants, the Dyke Arboretum is a great place to visit. So you could actually go there and kind of see stuff before actually buying it. So it's a great place to visit and support, and probably the best place to find started native plants.
They had several years ago, they had a plant tour in Salina, and they had a booth there one year, and their plants were really reasonable.
Yeah,
I mean, I didn't buy a native plant, I bought a hot, but it was,
yeah, I think,
it was in a gallon can, only $5.
yeah, Jason Graves, a horticulture agent from Salina, I think they said they get a few things from the Arboretum for their plant sale, but not, since it's always falls afterwards, they're limited on what they get from them. But they will have some plants there.
Do they run out pretty quick, or do they have a good selection that keeps coming?
At the Arboretum sale, my recommendation, if you can get there on that Friday,
Like this,
yeah. Cause,
they go fast.
yeah, when me and
This one?
when Artis and I went down, and we even got there in the morning, not early morning, but it was like 10 o'clock, and it was like there was a big crowd, and yeah, things go fast. But also, when you're looking at native plants, don't forget about the grasses. Indian grass, little blue stem, and switchgrass. They're but these are going to be a little bit taller, 4 to 6 feet. I would like to incorporate some Indian grass into the Crescent Park area. I think that would look good. Like I said, I got the little blue stem growing there now. I got 2 different types. One got taller than the other and kind of fell over, so that's where I think I'll probably come in and trim it back a little bit in June. See if I can prevent that. And then switchgrass is going to be very tall and a lot thicker, so you definitely want to know where you're going to be putting that, because you can definitely hide things. Then as far as resources, I'll just highlight this again, the Kansas Wildfire and Grasses website. And there again, Dyke Arboretum, they also have a website with some other good resources, especially on like landscaping layout examples. So it's visit their website, they got some good resources. And there again, love their plant list, that's a good place to start when you're looking at choosing plants, and then also their plant sale to actually buy native plants is probably the best around, because they're again, the count when you're going to like a Stutzman's or another type of garden center is, I typically find they don't have a whole lot of selection of true natives. And then also you're running into the native R's with some of those. You got the plantnative.ks.org website. That's another good website. That one is a little bit more specific to Northeast Kansas, but still some good information on it. The Kansas Native Plant Society, Grow Native website. And then I just kind of found this one interesting because it's a more specific plants for birds and website. So if you're looking for plants that are more specific for birds, that would be a good resource to visit. And just to wrap up, this planting native perennial species supports your native pollinators and the local food web, reduces your garden maintenance costs, and then also creates beautiful, sustainable gardens. Any other questions? And you can always reach out to me at any time. I do home visits, site visits. And always here to help, and like I said, as the season grows, make sure to visit the native plant demo area at Private Park, and so you can kind of see how that looks too.
There's lots of food, so don't be shy.
Okay, on my native grasses, I'm starting to get less pollinators in there every year. Will I do any good just spreading rather than trying to get something in there? And if I do that, when should I mow those native grasses? They're still standing now. And should I spread the seed and then mow that so that there's mulch and stuff over it, or?
Yeah, that's
Or
a
is that a
different
waste?
scenario. I think I'll look in there actually, and I know some of these type of teams require like a cold period to initiate germination and you ever burning probably.
Burning's a little bit close when I have the hedgerow there
Yes.
and a house there. I've done it before, but it kind of makes me nervous.
Yeah, so was I
Because if the fire ever gets into those evergreens, they're gone.
Yes.
And if it gets into my house, I'd be going.
Yeah. And I forgot, please fill out the evaluation and survey there.
But the Maximilian sunflowers are doing quite well, and but some of the other stuff is declining each year.
Thank you for doing this.
Yeah.
Right?
You have to look into it.
Okay.
Yeah. Might be the best.
So, and when's the right time to mow down the native grass? Well, I mean, yeah. Basically,
Just find out.
Okay.
I got back to.
That no. Unvalidated, it's fine.
Okay.
And completely redundant, well, not redone.
Yeah, that brings this.
Any of this kind of stuff. Like that. But I have not, I have yet.
That's what I learned.
Any,
Yes, I know. Sure.
like for.
So that's gonna be a process.
Next month. But I plan.